Jags fans, happy Monday, April 22nd. We are just a couple of days away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and I know the entire Jaguars fan base and community is excited about this year's draft, and I got a very special guest joining me here today to talk some Jaguars draft and football with you guys. Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jaguars, man. Thank you so much for taking some time to come onto the channel with me here today and talk some football.
I wouldn't have it any other way, man. I'm glad to be here. Let's do it.
Most definitely. Tony, really quickly before we kind of go ahead and dive deep into all of this, man, kind of let the people know a little bit about you, the work that you've done previously and you still currently do surrounding the Jaguars.
Yeah, man. I've been covering the Jags for almost 2 decades officially, but however, shout out to the yard man outside making all of that noise right now. But been covering the team officially for a couple of years, over 20 years now. And just doing work with radio, TV, and now, of course, with the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Jaguars and Locked On NFL. So trying to stay busy, man, and keep it in the middle of the road. That's all.
Of course, man. I mean, it's that time of the year. We talked about this before hopping on the pod, man. This time of the year, especially surrounding the Jags and me with the Magic in the postseason. I mean, there's work every day. There's content that needs to be put out there, man. But I know that I'm excited for this year's draft. Now, I want to say, going into this year's draft, I think that there's a lot of directions that the Jaguars could. I don't think Trent Ball necessarily needs to go and fill a gap, fill a position and say, hey, this team desperately needs another outside wide receiver. This team desperately needs another outside corner. While we could go in those directions, I think the Jaguars have put themselves post-free agency in a position where they could go best player available, whoever falls to them on the board. But I specifically want to talk to you today about the trenches. I want to talk about the offensive line, defensive line, and specifically in the first round. Where do you kind of lean with the Jaguars taking potentially an offensive tackle and a very good tackle class in the first round? Maybe a guy on the interior like a Byron Murphy, a Johnny Newton. There's a lot of directions the Jags could go. Where do you kind of fall in terms of the Jaguars in terms of taking a guy in the trenches?
Yeah, it's funny you asked me that because my latest show, I talked about that a little bit last week, but the latest podcast I did was about that possibility and how I've watched over the course of the last week. I've watched a lot of people that do a real good job of focusing and even fans. You know, it's not just media types. It just feels like offensive line is the thing that people don't want to do. They want to get away from it as much as possible. And they're thinking about wide receiver, because I tell you why. I'll get into the why. It's a very specific thing too, is the reason why. But the funny thing is I wouldn't be surprised if they did it. And the reason why I wouldn't be surprised if they did it is because there's always an old school person over there. And there's always, the people that do this for real, they have a way of doing things, right? And it's not the way that we do things. The fans and the way that we interact. And I don't know if you may have noticed, sometimes I tweet out like, it's not real. And the way that we view it and the way that content creates the way of doing things is from a fantasy football perspective. Like, build your team. The draft, especially the first round, is about building your team so that whoever looks good after today is what's going. But those teams don't think like that. They don't think, unless the only people that think like that are folks that might lose their job. And they continue to need things other than real winning to help them not lose their job. So that's why I always want teams to make sure with their change, to be on a clean slate, Brett, because what happens is if the organization and the fans are thinking the same way, and that's all short term, it's all myopic based on what will give us the best chance in order for us to field a team next year, we're always going to be losing. And we're always going to lose to teams that traditionally do it the other way, where they just go, we're taking the best player available because we don't have no needs. All on the field, we're taking the best player available because if you don't pick him, you got to play against him. And we're just going to sit him right here with low expectations, but tell him, because he's used to winning and he's so good, beat the guy in front of you. So you know what that does? It elevates the floor. And then the other guy in front of him gets old. And then when that guy goes out, they plug him right in. And guess what happens? They keep on trucking. They keep doing the same old thing over and over again. That's what they want to get to. And old school people, to answer your question, I did all of that to say this. They will always draft big people first. That's what they're going to do. And if you look no further, and I know this registers as a mistake, but look no further than guess who got almost, they tried to embarrass me. Tom Coughlin tried to hit me with the what? And all I did was say something to him that his former boss, Bill Parcells, said, when in doubt, take a big person. And he looked at me like I was crazy because you know who they took? They took Taven Bryan instead of taking Lamar Jackson. And I asked him that. And he goes, well, he is big. Okay, so now you want to Popovich me. And you know what that feels like, right?
I
so
know what that feeling is. The Greg
me
Popovich.
and act like you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And as it turns out, now that you look back at it, that's exactly what they did because they were taking the replacement. And this is when you wonder why a fight happened on the field. They were taking a Calais Malik Jackson replacement 2 years after 2017. That's what Taven was. And the game was 17-10, and they kept putting him in the game, taking guys like Malik and Ngakoue out. And those guys are trying to win, and they got mad. So to think that teams don't look ahead would be a mistake, especially when it comes to big people, and especially when it looks like they're only going to have one tackle under contract after this season.
Absolutely. And that's going to be Anton, right? To pick up on that point with Cam, because with Cam Robinson, right? He's got $20 million cap hit this season, I believe. You've got Walker Little as your swing tackle, but I doubt he re-signs with the team.
Why would he?
He wouldn't. He shouldn't. He's gotten little to no playing time, and he's only been thrusted in there when Cam's gone down or been suspended. And then you just re-signed Ezra Cleveland. You brought in Mitch Morse, and then you restructured the contract of Brandon Sheriff. You absolutely need to go out there and address the offensive tackle and address the trenches, right? How many times last season did we as Jags fans sit here and complain consistently? Yes, we had the injury bug, but Trevor Lawrence does not have enough time to step up into the pocket. The interior of the offensive line, you were limited with your play calling because of the poor production that Luke Fortner was giving you. You couldn't call certain run plays, certain zone gap schemes, couldn't run a play action because by the time Trevor Lawrence is getting out of that fake, there's already pressure up the middle. There are so many things systematically that were wrong with that offensive line last year outside of just the injury bug. And while I have been a big proponent of the fact that I'm not taking a tackle depending on the player in the first round this year, I'm okay with taking a tackle anywhere else in this year's draft because I truly believe that you have your starting five on that offensive line going into 2024. Now, I don't completely dismiss the sentiment of the Jaguars potentially taking a player that could not only be a great depth piece this year on that offensive line, whether you want to go on the interior or towards the tackles, but for the future moving forward, right? When we talk about potentially Amarius Mims, right? A lot of guys, we've talked about JPJ in the past. There's so many guys that really could fill those positions and fill those voids after 2024. I just don't know if I'm trying to make a win now team, even though you are still looking towards the future in 2024, that taking a guy at 17 overall for the sake of argument on the offensive line, when you already have your starting five, is what's necessarily going to take us over the top this season. Is that kind of where you're at too? I want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Well, that's where we are, but I'm on the side of it saying that if you even allow that type of thinking, unless you think you're just that close, and they got in trouble thinking that they were good. You know what I'm saying before. So my point is if you think you're that close, the question isn't whether or not the person that you pick takes you over the top this year. The question might be if we're looking at it as a 1 year thing, now you start looking at it like this. Okay, so if you're gonna put me in a box, not you, but I'm just saying in general, if somebody wants to put me in a box and make this a one year decision, I won't tell them or I won't ask them to say, tell me why taking this one guy makes sense. What I'll ask them is this: since we're doing this on a 1 year issue, tell me why taking that dude based on a 1 year decision. Tell me how he is going to take us over the top. If you base it on a 1 year decision, okay, so tell me how that corner, that wide receiver, tell me how he puts us over the top if that's what we're going to do. I don't. Because if that's not what we're going to do, what we need to do is we need to just take the dude that we think going to have the best career, reasonably at a need position or at a position that has a very high priority. So left tackle or right tackle. It's a high priority with a need position. So here's what I also would say. I'll say this. Where usually do starting right and left tackles come from? Draft, first and second day. Even if you don't get them first and second day, even if you don't get them on day one, which day one, like Anton Harrison, you can get a start at the end of the first round, right? So even if you don't do that, If you take them on day 2, which is second or third round, you might get a starter, sort of like Osiris Torrance started at guard. But if you don't, they have to come from player development. So either you go into next season and you're going to use a first round pick on a tackle, or whoever your guy is that's going to replace them has to be in development, because you know what never is in free agency? A starting right or left tackle. They almost never get there. They almost
I think Tyron Smith this free agency was the only exception to that rule.
And he might have been 91 years old. And he's 91 years old and he's a 1-year dude. Ain't nobody paying. Like, that's why do you think the Chiefs overpaid for our guy?
Taylor.
They did what? A 25-year? What? I don't care if we're gonna overpay for him. I don't care that he led the league in penalties. I'll tell you what he didn't do is he ain't getting beat up in the playoffs, and he was holding off some real good pass rushers in the playoff, wasn't he? And that's what they got him for that day. So the bottom line is, that's what this is all about. This is about building your team. We have to make sure that we don't start focusing so much on what it's going to look like on day 1 in 2024 and start really asking the big questions. Do they have a long-term answer? Do they have a long-term security force for Trevor Lawrence? Because I don't care who you get at wide receiver. If y'all tired of those quick outs, then they need to put some people in front of them. Because I know everybody's tired of the little bubble screens. I know everybody's tired of the ball going horizontally. I know everybody's tired of the fact that he gets rid of the ball really, really quick because he has to. I know there's no. You see what I'm saying? So I don't think they're going to take an offensive lineman. This is not me going to bat for them doing it, but this is, to me, going to bat saying I understand it, and there are more people in the NFL that always believe. Put it this way, I'll show you how. I'll give you the exact reason how.
Give me.
More people believe this, that because Jim Harbaugh is the coach with the Chargers, and because they got a personnel guy from the Baltimore Ravens, that even though they have a great quarterback in Justin Herbert, and even though they have a great left tackle who's only been in the league 2 years, and even though they lost both starting wide receivers this year, and even though they're picking 5th and they're going to get one of those 3 real good wide receivers, what is everybody saying? They wouldn't be shocked if Jim Harbaugh took Joe Alt and said, I'm building my offensive line first, because they say that's what people like that do, right? So if people like that are winners, that's how he won before. And Balky knows because he was with him in San Francisco. Baltimore, if we're going to take if everything is based on the way the Ravens folks would do it, well, the Ravens folks kind of know how to win over the last 30 years, right? So the thing is, the reason why taking that offensive lineman right there, even when they already have a really good left tackle and they have no wide receivers, then there's a franchise wide receiver sitting right there looking at him. Why do you think people are still saying that he might take a tackle?
You got to protect your franchise quarterback who you paid big money to.
That's it.
You paid him big money too. You got to protect him.
We keep describing old school coaches who win, people who've done things the right way, and there's a glaring need at wide receiver for a franchise quarterback who already has a franchise left tackle, and they're still saying that guy might take another lineman, because that's what we can talk all day about RPOs. We can talk all day about running the Shanahan offense. What has proven to win? Blocking, tackling. Folks do all of this stuff. The only person that's won off that little tree is McVay. But everybody and their brother has a Shanahan or a McVay assistant running their team, and they think that they're up next. How y'all up next and everybody doing the same thing? Y'all better watch the Chargers, who's going to do something different than anybody else. Is going to bust you in your mouth. The thing is, it's a copycat league, but I want to copy winning. I don't want to copy something that's trendy. And too many times, even in our content creation, we talk about things that are trendy instead of things that really might happen. And that's why I appreciate you asking me this question, because come Thursday night, something might happen that's real old school football, and Jaguar fans might have to take a sedative and go to sleep. And then they got to wake up. Yeah, and when they wake up, they'll go, okay, it makes sense now.
It does. I know. And here's where I'm at with that sentiment, because you just brought me right into my next point. I know Jags fans are going to absolutely lose their damn mind on Thursday evening.
Absolutely.
We trade back, or if we stay pat at 17 and we take an offensive lineman. And let's just say, for the sake of argument, we take an Amarius Mims out of Georgia, or we take a Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon. I don't know if he stays in the first round, but let's just say for the sake of argument, you are not, as the way the roster is currently constructed, neither one of those two players are going to be in your starting lineup on your starting 5 after everything that we've discussed, unless Cam gets traded or he gets cut and you save $16 million on the cap. Outside of that scenario, you're not taking an offensive lineman in the first round and starting him. They're a developmental piece that will be plug and play next season. And I know Jags fans are going to lose their mind until they settle down and calm down, because all I care about is protecting 16, right? The day he gets paid, whether that's this offseason, next year, whenever that day comes, you need to make sure you have the best protection for him on the offensive line. He can make a bunch of wide receiver twos, Gabe Davises, Christian Kirks, and a bunch of guys who I mean no disrespect to, look better than they are, right? Especially when you put them in a system where they're going to succeed, you're going to flourish, and you put these guys in a position to be successful. I care way more about the trenches than I do about the skill position guys. Now, look, do I want to be greedy and take a Brian Thomas Jr.? Do I want to take an A.D. Mitchell? Do I want a Kool-Aid, a Terrion? Of course I want all of these guys at premium positions. That's a no given, that is a given. But on the offensive line, I'm not going to be mad. I really do not think that there's a single scenario where Trent Baalke could really take a guy with his prototype, his physicality, his length, the guys that he likes his measurables for in the first round that we could go wrong with. There really isn't. If we take a Johnny Newton, a Byron Murphy, JPJ, a Marius Mims, any of these guys, I'm really not going to be upset. And like I said, I want to be greedy. I want to take the flashy player. I want to take the guy that's going to help Trevor. But if we could take a guy that's going to be the best player available at the moment, if depending on how the board falls, and we get a guy moving forward for the future, I'm not going to be upset at all. You're not going to catch me complaining about that.
So the only one person in there that I would disagree with, and I told somebody this on a national show the other day, is the kid from Texas. But
Murphy,
I can't imagine Trent Baalke. So this is leaning with his tradition, not only the Jaguars team building, but his tradition and how much he cares for traits. I can't see him drafting a 6'1", 297-pound defensive lineman. I just don't see it. Especially, and
that's why I had to bring up those traits.
Yeah,
bring up the measurables.
Yeah, folks got to remember, most of the time when they're in their best lineup, you're gonna have Devon Hamilton at 335, and you got Eric Armstead there, and if he's not in there, you'll have Roy Robertson Harris, who they gave a lot of money. So to me, it has to be somebody that's different. So Johnny Newton, and there are going to be people now that'll pull their RAS up and go, look, he's a better athlete than him. But my point is I'm looking at guys that I think translate to the NFL better. I think Johnny Newton, I think Michael Carter, I talked about him. And Michael Hall, and Dwayne Carter. I think those guys are a little bit different because they're bigger. The kid from Texas kind of reminds me of the dude that you grew up with that was always stronger than everybody else. But at some point, he's going to run into people and it's going to catch up. Right. So, but your point is legit. Here's something else to grab a hold to, Brad. Ask yourself this. If at the presser, the one that took forever for them to do, the season-ending press conference.
Of course.
They had Doug one day, and then they had Trent. And they said, we're not big and strong and physical enough. So if they say we're not big, strong, and physical enough, everyone pretty much was like, wow, that was refreshing. That was honest. And they just admitted everything after the 49ers game. After the 49ers game, I did a podcast, a podcast right after the game. I said, y'all, I seen something that ain't going to get fixed until the end of the year. I saw something today that wasn't a bad performance, but I saw who they are. And the thing that I saw, we're in trouble because they can't fix it till the end of the season. And I proceeded to sit there for 15 minutes and say, they ain't got no sand in their pockets. They have no hind parts. And against really good teams, you can't get away from that. That is, you can't scheme, game plan. You can do whatever you want to do. In football, it's like being in boxing and having a glass jaw or not being able to take body punches. You are in trouble. There's no if and ands away. Against a real good fighter, there's no way you're going to win. And I saw that. I said, there ain't no way they're going to beat playoff teams. Not that team. They might win. I think they won against Houston later in the year. So
they did.
So when they came out and said that, now from the time that they said that was prior to free agency, I said that they can't cherry pick and fix that. Just like when Urban was here and we were slow, and they went out and got Tim Jones, and then went out and got Philip Dorsett, and they drafted ETN. Team speed, being a slow team doesn't mean you go get the fastest guy you can and put him on your team. It wasn't working. That's not going to work because there's play speed, and this is the thing about Keon Coleman. There's play speed. You saw him run the gauntlet.
And then there's game speed.
And then there's that 40 time. That 40 time is one thing, but then you saw the other kid run the gauntlet. Jerry Rice ran a 4.6, but I ain't never saw nobody catch him. So my thing is there's a difference between game speed. How fast do you play? So they've talked so much about their lack of physicality. They got Mitch Morse and Eric Armstead.
Not enough. Is not enough.
Do you where have they addressed anything other than getting Ezra Cleveland back healthy? Tell me one place. And they said this, just in case folks want to sit here and think that they meant guys got to do better in the strength and conditioning. Trent Baalke also said at the combine, they don't get stronger. They're born like that. So he took the strength and conditioning people off the hook. He basically said, no, you can't make, in his raspy voice, you don't make them like that. They're born like that. So if they're born like that, now I go back to this. Well, why did you draft that weak center? But he doesn't go back.
With a 3rd round pick.
So we don't go backwards, right? If the team ain't big and physical, but you're the traits guy, traits suggest that you're going for the most big and physical people. How come you came out and said that the team isn't big and physical enough, but you've been building it for 3 years? So what have you done? You added a big physical receiver. Do you think they added Gabe Davis because they wanted to be a better blocker at the wide receiver position?
No.
So when I try to get people to wrap it around their head that they're going to address these trenches at some point, and now I've heard that it's day 3. I've heard from people that follow the trends of who they've been working out and where Phil Rauscher has been mandated to spend his time looking, but all of that could also be a smokescreen. But it's up to us as content creators to talk about the possibilities. Because I'll tell you right now, last year, even with Cam Robinson's suspension looming, I sat there in that draft room. People thought they were taking an edge rusher. In fact, somebody had reported that it was the Azuma pick, the guy that ended up going to the Chiefs from Kansas State, and it ended up not being that, and they got it wrong. But folks thought they were going to take an edge rusher. Folks thought that they were going to go edge last year in the offseason because Doug said that they needed to fix their pass rush. They still ain't added an edge rusher other than the guys that they already had, unless you want to talk about the dude they just signed from Tennessee. So, and he ended up being right about that. He was like, I ain't need to get no edge rusher. Nobody's going to. How about this, Brett? You remember last year, we need another edge rusher. Remember people wanted to trade for.
Hey, let's go get Jadeveon Clowney. Let's go get Leonard Floyd and free agency. All these guys.
Right. But where are all of those people now that were saying we needed an edge rusher? When I was saying that I'll take another edge rusher if that means y'all gonna get rid of Josh Allen. Like if you're gonna franchise tag Josh Allen and then somebody gives you a late 1st or early 2nd round pick for Josh Allen and you signed Danielle Hunter, I ain't gonna be mad at you because now you have Danielle Hunter and the pick as opposed to just having Josh, right? So I'm not gonna be angry at you if you did that, but you ain't gonna tell me that they're gonna have Trayvon, Josh Allen, and Danielle Hunter on this team at one time, and everybody's going and Trayvon's just gonna be happy playing 3 technique whenever they ask him to. No, that was never just push him inside
like that. No,
they're not.
That was not gonna happen.
Right. So the point is nobody is out of all those people that were begging for the edge rusher that has never come. You don't see them begging for an edge rusher anymore.
I know. It's wild how quickly the tables turn.
Isn't it? So now everybody's acting like the fact that they might look ahead and take an offensive lineman is something that's really, really weird. Do I think they're going to do it? No. But from a football standpoint, if they decided to do it and they said, you know what, we're going to take Amarius Mims and we're going to take Tyler Guyton. We're going to take the biggest trait field guy we can, plant him at right tackle. We're going to now cut Cam. And they could arguably say the reason why we kept Cam Robinson up until that point is not because we knew we were going offensive line, but because we had to make sure the guy we wanted was going to be there. See, a lot of people are focusing on the position instead of the person.
And you're bringing up exactly what Balky just talked about at that last conference that you were just at with Balky and Doug, when Balky was like, hey, unless you have the number 1 overall pick, which of course you are never guaranteed to know who's going to fall on that board. You can have a projection, you can have an idea, you never know. And that's why he didn't talk about trading up into the top. He kept relentless thing 11, 12, 13, giving guys, whether it's a smoke screen or not, hey, if we feel as if our guys who we value on our board, regardless of positional need, are there, we are going to move up. And like I said, he could just be lying out of his ass for all we know. But that's exactly what the Jaguars' philosophy needs to be when you talk about best player available, when you talk, like you said, about a Tyler Guyton, a Marius Mims. I know people are going to flip their shit. I know people are going to lose their mind when the Jaguars take someone at 17 or they trade back and they take their offensive lineman, because you're right. Cam Robinson needs to be the insurance plan. And I don't like to talk down on Cam Robinson because he's a very good starting left tackle when he's out there on Trevor Lawrence's blind side. But the drastic difference between him and Walker Little right now is just their contract, right? I do think Cam is a better left tackle, especially in pass protection, but let's not sit here and act like a $20 million cap hit is not going to potentially restrict the Jaguars from going out there and making another big move, right? Wherever that is, wherever they want to fill a void and do whatever it is to do in 2024. And that's exactly why I'm completely agreeing with you on this matter about making sure that Cam Robinson's your insurance plan. And if you have your guy at 17 and you say, hey, let's go out there and get Fuaga, or let's go get JC Latham, and he is there just staring at you, take him. I have no problems with that. I have absolutely zero problem with that. And we briefly talked about it. I just want to kind of wrap up and talk about this as well too, because we talked about the edge rushers. We talked about how everyone last year wanted the Jaguars to go out there and get another edge rusher before we saw Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker ascend. Where do you fall if the Jaguars go out there and they take an edge rusher in the first round? I'm all for it. I don't see an issue with taking a Jared Verse, Laiatu Latu, or any of those guys who you might feel like could just absolutely take this front seven to a whole nother level, especially because I know Josh Allen's going to produce. I expect Trayvon to take another step, and you can have even more packages rotating that front seven inside and out.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It makes less sense to do that than the offensive line from a macro perspective. Looking at, but I don't know if you saw. You remember I asked Trent the other day. I said, "Is there a dip? There's a little bit of a." I was trying to give him a soft landing about the offensive line.
Soft landing, okay.
Because what I was saying was, folks won't get mad if you take another edge rusher because he'll be rotating.
Of course. Right? He's going to get playing time, exactly.
Right, just like Yannick Ngakoue had a chance to get 8.5 sacks as a rookie, even with Dante Fowler and Calais Campbell starting, right? But you can't. But by nature, you don't want to have an offensive lineman in a rotation.
No,
because the only time he's playing is when somebody's hurt. The starting
and you
offensive
need that
line
chemistry and continuity on that starting five, anyways. You need that on that offensive line. But go ahead.
Right. So having a great player who is in development as a first-round pick as an offensive lineman is a luxury. Having a third pass rusher who can immediately start if you need him is a necessity. There's two different things. So that's why the thing that's a necessity is more acceptable than the offensive lineman, because the only way your offensive lineman ever plays is if a starter gets hurt. So nobody wants you using a first-round pick on that, but that's not what you're doing it for. You're doing it because he's your future. And what you're hoping is when you pick him, if it's the right guy, not the position, and that's what I keep saying with people. They say, would you take an offensive lineman at 17? I say, no.
If he's the right player.
Because my guy at 17 is Quinion Mitchell. I said the other day, if there's one person that's reasonable, that everyone thinks is going to be around, if he's at 17, who do you sprint the card up for? If Quinion Mitchell doesn't get picked by 16, I'm sitting there at the podium with my card, with a bow tie around it. He's the guy that I think is that dude, right? So someone says, well, what if he's gone? Is it Kool-Aid? Is it Terrion? I say I like them both, but my list doesn't go that way. Mine goes like this. If he's there, whoever the next best player might not even be a corner. I don't believe in just sticking with a position and just taking the next guy. I believe in take the next guy. They don't just put positions in the Hall of Fame. They put players in the Hall of Fame.
Preach, man. You're preaching right now to the choir, man. I love to hear it, and I think that you're bringing up some really good points, especially because the Jaguars are not in a position where they just need to address, hey, we desperately need this outside receiver. We desperately need that outside corner opposite side Tyson Campbell. They truly have put themselves in a position where they could go best player available, whether that is Quinyon Mitchell, whether that is Terrion Arnold, Brian Thomas Jr., any of these guys that you want to throw out there. And look, I just want to say for the record one more time, Jags fans, if the Jags take an offensive lineman in the first round of this year's draft, understand it's not for this year. We've talked about them having their starting five. This is about protecting our franchise quarterback and having potentially 2 tackles for the next 7-8 years, right, of control. I guess maybe not 7-8 years, depending on how long you can pick up the 5th-year option extensions. You get my point. You've got your 2 tackles of the future, and Anton Harrison and whoever else that you're selecting. I am completely fine, for the most part, with whatever decision Trent Baalke and the front office makes on Thursday evening. I am going to just trust the process. I hope that we trade back up into the first round, depending on how the board falls, but we'll really see how all of this goes, man. Tony, thank you so much for taking some time, man, talking some Jaguars football with me here today, man.
Glad to be here, man. Keep doing a great job on both fronts, football and basketball, man. And you keep getting text messages from me. I keep bugging you. I'll do that, man, every time. Man, I do it all the time, man, to my friends. Don't worry about it.
Hey, man, I need that knowledge and wisdom too, man. As someone who's a young up and comer in this game, man. Been in the game, but still,
you killing it,
young
man.
up and comer.
You killing it, man. You killing it.
Yeah, thank you, man.
I've been watching for a long time, man.
Most definitely, man. Thank you, Bob. Much love. But Jags fans, man, before we go ahead and get up out of here, man, make sure you guys go ahead and hit the like bell, hit the subscribe bell, and make sure you guys go ahead and follow me and Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jaguars podcast. All of the links will be in the description down below. And Jags fans, we got another special guest coming to the show tomorrow evening, so make sure you guys do stay tuned for that as well. But thank you guys again for sticking around throughout the whole video. Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. And like always, let's go Jags.